In the United States, we have a high rate of suicide in women between the ages of 45 to 54. That is exactly the middle and the end of perimenopause. That means that we're losing women to a normal and natural hormonal shift, not to an illness, not to a disease. We can't do this anymore. We can't continue to go through this in silence, trying to navigate through it without having anybody know about it, or only discussing it on social media, on private social media groups. None of us want the younger generations to go through this. I think it's time for this to stop. We need to talk about it. I can't remember how I came across Angie's website, but I immediately started following her on social media. I wish I had known her before age 35 to be ready for perimenopause. I wish I had known her in my early 40s when I thought I was just falling apart. I had no idea what was happening to me. Go to her website or social media page. She is so spot on everything you need to know and do to navigate through this as natural as you want. She makes sense. Long story short, I sent her a message, she replied right away, and she jumped on board to give you and me and all of us a window about the reality of perimenopause in our country. Here's video number 4, perimenopause in Scotland.
Only recently, it never used to be. Perimenopause, the term, has come across from the States for us. UK, we always referred to it as menopause. Menopause, the word just covered all of it. And for decades, for a long time, there was no distinction between perimenopause, menopause, and probably postmenopause as well, actually. It was all just lumped together. And in fact, it wasn't even given the name menopause. Most of the time, whilst I've been on this earth, it's been referred to as the change. It was always something that was too embarrassing to talk about. It was something that was looked at as a lot of stigma around it. So it was hush hush, you don't talk about that and you don't ask about it. It was quite an insult to say to somebody anything about menopause, but certainly to ask them. Some people will still get very offended if you start to strike up a conversation about perimenopause or menopause. A lot of women don't know. A lot of women go into it not realizing that they are in perimenopause and very close to the end of it, close to menopause. It's been a journey of discovery, really, for millions of us to discover where we are on this whole sort of timeline. And I still have people coming to my events now who are in their late 40s, early 50s, saying, can you just clarify what is perimenopause? I don't know where I am with it. I don't understand exactly what it's all about. So there's a lot of women who are unsure. There's a lot of women who are just like getting on with their lives and not aware of it at all. Some are okay with that and some are not at all. And so there's some women, quite a lot of us, who are trying to seek this information out. And because this whole term perimenopause came from the States, that's where a lot of our information has come from books, from magazines, celebrity interviews, documentaries, things we've seen on TV, in magazines and things. So there's been certainly over the past, I would say 5 years, there's been more media attention around it, and that's driven our individual curiosities around it for ourselves, much more so than if that hadn't, like previous to that, if we go back 10, 15, 20 years, the media was not talking about this whatsoever. Yeah, it's tricky to explain that to the younger generations in a way that they can connect with it, because you're 25, you're 30, you don't want to think about being 45. But yeah, the reality is that things are changing. At 35, that's when we know things inside that internal chemistry set is already shifting. Trying to have those conversations in a way that doesn't scare them off, doesn't put them off, in a way that they can connect with their own body. I think that's becoming a little bit more trendy, if that's the right word now, to be more connected with yourself. I'm seeing a lot more trends now around books coming out about period health way before perimenopause starts. I'm seeing more discussions in families, daughters and mothers, how to have that chat about periods and things. I mean, that's always been a conversation that's had to be had at some point, but I'm seeing more information and input into how do we best go about that. Having even things like on your phone, like tracking apps and things for your own cycle, that was unheard of. Nobody did anything like that. Quite a short space of time within my generation, that has completely changed. Nobody cared what their period was doing, as long as it wasn't painful, and as long as it arrived, it's all that we cared about. And then it would go away and we could get on with our lives again. But now we're being encouraged to track symptoms and track the timing, and I think things like that is showing the sign of trend that things are shifting. Since 2016, I've been helping women to navigate menopause as naturally as they want to, as able to, and focusing on these symptoms, looking at the systems, the body systems, and trying to take that bigger approach around it, and trying to help them to feel more confident in themselves and to get through it in a way that they feel that they aren't losing their health or their head. So there's a lot of women who feel lost, unanchored, a little bit floating in life. You know, sometimes it's not just the hormones. The hormonal changes do nudge us towards those feelings of change mentally, not just biochemically, but that changes our attitudes around ourselves and our life. It makes us start to question things, and to a lesser or greater degree for us all as individuals. And I want to help women more with that, using their journey through menopause and also the energies around that as an individual woman, and helping them to make the choices that they want to make, and going through that with confidence and curiosity and adventure. It's changing. It's definitely changing. I wouldn't say we're on it. There are, with our health system in the UK, it's an amazing service that we've got with the NHS, the National Health Service. So that means that all people paying taxes are paying into the funds that pay for our health services. So we don't have to have health insurance. So when you go to the general practitioner, your local doctor in the town or in the village, you're guaranteed a standard service, or you should be guaranteed a standard service, because they're all trained to that same level. With menopause and perimenopause, it can be quite a mixed response that we can get, unfortunately, because although everyone's trained, all the doctors are trained to the same level, all the general practitioners, all our GPs can offer the same service. That's their job. There'll be varying levels of knowledge and training that they've had around menopause and perimenopause, and they've got a certain amount of tools in their toolbox of things and how to help us through it and deal with it and advise and guide us through it. So that can vary county to county around the whole country. I've heard some great stories of really, really supportive GPs who have just like gone above and beyond and really shown wide open eyes, lots of reliable guidance that they've been able to help people with. And I've also heard the opposite end of it, where the woman, the person has gone to the GP desperate for help, wanting some answers, what's going on for me, and being told everything from here's antidepressants, or do you want HRT? I've even heard stories of, no, you're too young, you're only 45, it can't be that yet. I've heard stories where they've said, why don't you get a hobby? Why don't you get a boyfriend, a dog, etc., etc. They're really horrific pieces of advice that just leave me astounded. Our training, and not mine personally, but as a country as a whole, the training that is being offered is definitely hotting up. It's definitely in the front line to be reviewed around this, because it's had so much media attention. The past experiences where it's fallen through, where it's fallen down and not met needs, because the NHS was never set up to help women in this way. It was always for treating illness and disease, and menopause doesn't really work that way. Because of all this media attention, they can see what's going wrong, and there's a lot more input that's now going into updating their advice, the knowledge that's available. We've got across the country, we've also got a number of specialist menopause clinics that you can be referred to for specialist help. So it's it's in addition to the general practitioner. If you were really struggling and needing advice and support that was beyond what they have available, then they'd refer you on. The waiting lists are long, but as I'm told by the people who have been there and done that, it's well worth persevering to get that help, because it has really helped hundreds, thousands of people. I think it's been another media push in the last few decades around healthy exercise, and the focus has also not switched entirely, but there's the mental health aspect that's really become a big topic for us. Talking about mental health, addressing it in all situations, in the home, in the workplace, and being aware of physical health, moving our body as being linked very strongly to that. So I think our exercise habits in general have been given a bit of a boost because of that general knowledge that's been disseminated more widely, rather than it just being about, you've got to exercise every day to be healthy. I think the understanding of why that's important has been a bit more understood. We have a lot of health food shops and independent health food stores over here. Pretty much every town has got either a branded one or an independent one. Some of them are really, really good. They know their stuff. They're really helpful, really beneficial to somebody going in and wanting some help. And then there's others that are literally just shops selling white label supplements. So any supplement from factory made, it could be all sorts of rubbish in there, and they put their branded label on, and you're trusting that what's on the label is in the box, and it's not always the case. Just those supplement shops, and they have a health food logo across the top of the door, and a lot of people trust that they are going to get what they need, but it tends to end up being, unfortunately, being like pick and mix, because we're taking one for that, we'll try that. My sister said those are good, next door said she'd try those and they're pretty good. And it's just crazy. I understand the level of desperation that it can come to, because I've been there, I've done that. I think sometimes we trust in those things too much, and those things really should be topping up what we're already doing, and looking at, if we're going to go into one of those shops, some of them are great, but let's do the due diligence and look at where the stuff's coming from, the quality of it. Is it medical grade? Where am I getting the advice from? Which ones do I actually need? Which ones are overlapping onto each other? We take too many of them and we overload the liver and the detox system of the body anyway, and we're working against ourselves. There's a general view that, we put back in some of that estrogen that we're losing, and the symptoms will go away. It's the general hope, because we're replacing what's been lost, and so we're all sorted. We'll take the HRT and everything's going to be fine. And I'm here always on the sidelines saying, oh, just actually no, it's not quite that simple. There's some things that we need to be considered. When somebody comes to me and asks for advice and explains their symptoms, I'm firstly asking a little bit about the history, what else is overlapping, because it's never just perimenopause, right? There's always stress and other crap from 20 years ago that's sort of still hanging around. We've all got those things under the bed that does creep into how perimenopause is expressed for us. And I'm always thinking in a big box, rather than, right, let's solve this little symptom, trying to pick this one, splinter out of the problem, and then the pain will go away. I don't take that approach, because that would work if it were a disease. So not my systems over how I run things, but systems of the body, like how are we supporting the liver? How are we supporting adrenals? How are we avoiding constipation, the devil of all perimenopause symptoms? How are we helping brain health and the nervous system? What are we doing to support these things? Trying to get away from, here, take a pill, that's going to take 3 of those twice a day and everything's going to be fine. I wish I could say that, but the reality is it doesn't work like that. We need a bigger, wider view on it. That's a very similar story. Yeah, very similar. There's a lot of women over here who are struggling in their jobs, with focus, with concentration, with hot flushes, with brain fog, wanting to work from home. This is why last year was actually quite beneficial and helped in many ways. There's a lot of women struggling and trying to keep their job, and because there isn't or hasn't always been that great level of support that we all need to know that why we're feeling how we're feeling, and also having access to sometimes the medical help, sometimes it's non-medical support, but it's still support that's going to help and alleviate the symptoms, and that advice, that guidance, that help and support isn't readily available. That can be a barrier in itself and make the whole thing even more overwhelming. So it makes work even more difficult. And there are lots of women who will go part-time. They'll change their careers completely, or change their hours, change their location, try to change departments or try to work from home. They'll try their best to work it so that they've still got their career that they've earned for, trying to get up the ladder for decades, and they don't want to give that up. But at the same time, there's this quality of life as well. Yeah. Oh God, yeah. Yeah. I'd like to think that that's starting to change, but I'm on the leading edge of that wave, and there's a lot of women in front of me and behind me, and a lot of women who are still in that mindset. And it's not, obviously it's not a woman's problem, it's a whole world problem. It's everyone's issue around this. So yeah, there's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of, as I said in the beginning, a lot of stigma, embarrassment. And there's been, for so long, there's been this whole world view for our Western culture that getting older means that you are less valuable, less worthy. And I'd like to think that that is changing. Definitely. I want to be part of that. I don't want to be part of that old story at all. Certainly hot flushes, because it impacts sleep. If it's a night sweat, and we all know the horrors of not getting a good night's sleep and how that impacts on the whole week, really, not just that next day. So that can be a big one. Sleep in general can be a thing. But I think some of the bigger, more troubling things are some of the mental health aspects. So sometimes it's a loss of self, a loss of purpose, or just shifting inside and not quite knowing how to explain it, not being able to explain how you feel, and not being able to go back to how vital and how healthy and how exuberant you were, that life force is somehow fading and not being able to get it back. And that can affect so many different aspects across the whole life that can be really disturbing. Good conversations around it, opening up more. We're starting to do this more, definitely. Conversations that need to happen at work, at home, within families. I think that's possibly one of the areas where it needs to go. I want to have more conversations around what can I do now, in your 30s, in your early 40s, in your mid 40s, to break down the fear. I think that's possibly one of the big problems of it, the fear around it. How am I going to cope? What's going to happen to me? There's fear around taking HRT. There's fear around not taking HRT. There's so much information that is at our fingertips with Google. It can be a blessing and a curse, because it can be overwhelming and it can be scary at the same time. And I'd like to see this side of it talked about more, not just the clinical stuff. That's probably it. That's probably the problem, that it's too medicalized. I'm trying to put a bit more earth back in, trying to put a bit more of the, who do you want to be? How do you want this to go, rather than what do you want to take? Still stigma. The guys are very much, you imagine how in the dark they feel when we feel in the dark around and confused around what the hell's going on in here. They feel that too. They struggle often. I've seen that they struggle to find a way to talk about that in a way that isn't either going to get them criticized or, divorced perhaps, or in a way that won't end up in some kind of work tribunal. They are sometimes rabbit in headlights around how on earth am I going to talk about this? A large proportion of the guys, in my experience, have no idea how this affects us. And it's because it's been quite a quick change in our country. It's been certainly over the past 5 years since I've been talking about it. It's been a thing that we referred to as the change, and it was all hush hush. Now suddenly we're looking at menopause documentaries on the BBC and Channel 4, and it's mainstream. So the guys have had to catch up very quickly, and a lot of them haven't at all. They don't know how to respond and react to this. So they're left in the dark, and they're left either avoiding it completely and saying, oh, that's women's business, I don't need to know about that. So that can create that tension, that gap, resentment, and misunderstanding, miscommunication. Twice now I've had husbands in for consultations, either with or without their wives, to talk about it, to help them understand what their wives are going through and help them to understand how they can talk about it and best way that they can support them, and just reassure them that, you know, we can talk about this and there are things you can do. It's not the end of the world for them, for their relationship. It's another chapter. Things move on. You're going to have to make some adjustments. Attitudes have to change. Do not laugh about it. You know, this is not something that we sweep under the carpet. This is something that needs to be discussed. It's an area where women are wanting to be heard and seen desperately,